Good morning, everyone, and a very, very actually chilly welcome from Johannesburg. Really feeling the cold at the moment, but I hope you are all keeping well in the various regions that we find you in this morning. Looking at everyone attending today, I see that we really are well represented, not only in each region of South Africa, but also outside of our borders. I think what it does show is how important this discussion is. I think it's a discussion for so many organizations and professionals at the moment that are worried about this 1 July. What does POPIA mean to us? Are we ready? And I think that is the most important thing. This morning, we really are privileged to have several speakers that are really going to help guide us and just make sure, and I have no doubt that you are ready, and I have no doubt that you already know exactly what you're doing. And I think it's just that surety. I think it's just knowing, am I on track? Are we ready? We don't want to be caught with our pants down at all. So I'd like to really thank, first of all, from Lexus Nexus, our partner that is really assisting UMS at the moment in terms of looking at our compliance and our POPIA compliance at the moment. Greg Chamberlain, a huge thank you for facilitating for us at the moment. And Greg is the general manager in the department for Lexus Assure, which I'm sure he'll give you a brief just overview of. And then we've got Babita Rajpal, well known to us at UMSA on our teams from Marsh. And then I have John Giles, who's in legal services from Michelson Attorneys. So thank you to the three of you this morning. I'm really looking forward to, I know the UMSA team, the whole team is also sitting on just as well. I mean, from an UMSA point of view, we've been preparing for years, just making sure that all our processes are in line and so on. But a couple of months ago, we had a look and thought, good grief, it's coming so quickly. Are we ready? And that is where our discussions also began. So just making sure that everything is 100% in place. And I think that is why we are all here this morning as well. And also to see if they're not, then what are we going to do? And I think that is important. But before we get started, and before I hand over to Greg to facilitate the session for us this morning, just a couple of things to check. As you know, you won't be putting on your cameras or having that normal interaction of speaking, but the chat box is there for you. And we really urge you to please use the chat box this morning, ask the questions. Greg and the team will be checking, we'll be answering questions, and Greg will be able to ask the speakers as well and give you feedback. So please use that chat box, it is your voice. If you are following on social media, the hashtag for today is hashtag live with UMSA. And then afterwards, I'm going to challenge you to please complete the survey. So you'll see the survey at the end of the event. But today we're going to pick one from the surveys completed, and that person will win a Take-A-Lot voucher. So something really worthwhile at the end, a very, very quick survey just to let us know and help us in terms of your feedback around this event. So if you can complete that, and then we'll let you know the results later in terms of who has won that Take-A-Lot voucher. And then also just a couple of things from IRMSA point of view. You know, a couple of discussions I've been having with members in the last couple of weeks since we last met on the event platform. The first thing has been with the board exams coming up. I'm sure you know with the Serum Prof and the Serum Prac. So Serum Prac being board exam 1, Serum Prof being board exam 2. Board exam 1 is going to be in November, and board exam 2 will be in October. And the closing dates are for both exams in terms of registering are the beginning of July. Now, a couple of discussions I've been having have been around exemption, and people curious to know, I am at quite a high level, I've got a wealth of experience, etc. Do I need to do board exam 1? And the answer is not necessarily. You may be able to apply for exemption. And the way to do it is to check the criteria for board exam 2 to see, do I meet the criteria for board exam 2? And look, I mean, we're looking at an NQF 8 level, risk management experience at that strategic level and so on. But if you do meet that criteria, please have a discussion with the board exam team, because you will be able to get the exemption that you want and go straight to write board exam 2. But if not, write that board exam 1. It's really going to be valuable for you. So I look forward to seeing it. And, you know, we're preparing for the AGM that will be coming up on the 23rd of June. And I'm amazed to see how many people wrote board exams during last year. And I think they did take that challenge. You know, we sent out a challenge to say, you're at home, use this time. We know you're working hard and so on, but I couldn't believe how many people actually did it, and they graduated last year. So the numbers of Serum Pracs and Profs have risen beautifully. So that's really great. And I think the biggest thing for you right now is to make sure that you are not missing that designation, because we are doing a lot at the moment as well in terms of focusing on those folk that have the professional designations that are registered with SAPRA. So now is the time to step up with that. The other thing, another area that I've been having quite a few discussions with members with at the moment is with regards to training. So as you all know, we've got our online training where it's pretty much a classroom training where you go on, instead of being in a classroom, you know, you come on, you have your normal training class, and then we facilitate. We also have our e-learning that is developed that you can do at your own time. The biggest discussion at the moment has been, I still really am concerned about my team, about building the team, building the board, building our risk committees, etc., our risk champions. What do we do? And so the answer is we call it external training, where we actually come to you, we come to your organization, and we build the program around your organization. We speak your speak, you know, we use your terminology within your organization, and everything is bespoke for you. So if you need to have that discussion with us, as well as many organizations are, please do so, because I think at the moment it's valuable. Also from a safety and health point of view, I think it's something easily for us to control as well in terms of working with your organization and controlling the numbers and so on. So that's really worthwhile. And then two more things before I hand over to Greg. So the first thing would be with regards to the conference coming up at the end of September. So the program is fantastic. You know, we've actually built the program around the competencies that were outlined in the South Africa Risk Report that was released earlier in the year. And so that's been quite exciting, building it. You know, we've got streams that we're going to be working in, and so all the competencies are covered. So you're going to get this wealth of information covered, and just building those competencies that you need, and then linking, and all the competencies link to the board exams as well. So it's really going to be an amazing program. The other interesting thing is that the team are building the event almost like a hybrid style event, meaning that we're not going to have a venue with everybody sitting in. What we are going to do is have certain sessions in a couple of the provinces where we've got a heavy membership, and so the team will be looking at that and having some speakers coming live from those regions as well, with smaller groups in venues around the country at different times, and having breakfast or teas or cocktails around in the various areas. And I think that's going to be quite exciting, and also bringing the people like me that are missing having people with me at a conference. So I think we're going to be really creative with how we do that. And then the last thing, I said there were two things. This is my last thing now, is the awards. You would have seen that the award nominations have been open. And I think, you know, after last year, we've seen amazing successes. We've seen amazing work done by organizations and many risk professionals. And I think it is really time to acknowledge. I mean, last year, if you think about it, it was like a crazy, crazy vortex that we found ourselves in. And just if we can just, bring our heads up and take a deep breath of fresh air and just consider who needs to be recognized after one hell of a tricky year last year. And so I just really encourage you to have a look and at yourselves as well and at your teams. Please look at those nominations, and the team will be sharing, very soon in terms of what we're going to be doing with the awards. The one thing I can tell you, so I'm going to tweak your interest, is that it's not going to be an awards dinner. So we're completely evolving our awards and what we're going to be doing. And I'm very excited with what we've got planned. So really looking forward to that. And with that, I've got so much to share with you, but I'm going to remind you to though complete the survey at the end for that one lucky Take-A-Lot voucher winner. I would love that voucher. I'd love to do some shopping, but I'm not allowed to enter. The team said I can't. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Greg Chamberlain from Lexus Nexus, and let's get this program and this very important discussion going. Greg, good morning.
Morning, Julian. How are you?
I'm very well, and how are you?
A little warmer than the last few days, thanks.
I know, a little bit. Let's hope that it carries on like that today. But Greg, you and I have been having this POPIA discussion quite a bit in the last while. I know that, you laughed earlier that we have been spending a lot more time together. But thank you for your time and thank you for being here today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for the invitation.
Fantastic. Greg, I'm going to hand over to you. We've got Babita and John that are ready. So let's get going. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Julian, and welcome to all the attendees. I know that Julian worked out that you are from around the country. I haven't been through, but I've seen that there are about 150 odd attendees, and yeah, welcome, and I hope you enjoyed today's session. So my name's Greg Chamberlain. I'm from Lexus Nexus, like Julian said, and yeah, we're obviously very involved in the compliance and legal space. And we've been come across, POPIA, what is it all about and what are my obligations, etc. So just some opening thoughts on the readiness of, and I don't want to say the industry because it goes further than industry, but are we ready for POPIA? And Julian said quite boldly, and I think she was just trying to be kind to all her members, that she's very confident that you all ready and have been for a long time. And perhaps we should throw that up on the poll and see who is confident that they are ready. But, and the other point of view, more cynically, is that no one's ready. And I don't think either are true. I think there's a state of readiness of everyone. You look at the industries involved. The financial sector, for instance, has been obliged to comply with a lot of personal information for a long period of time. The health industry, and the legal industry have all sorts of compliance obligations with regard to personal information. So I think we're going to see that there's some industries that are really, really, really prepared for this, and we're going to find others that are not. The other thing that's going to influence it is the nature of the industry. Obviously a bank is dealing with personal information on a regular, daily, hourly, weekly, basis. Whereas if you take a manufacturing facility, they kind of say, well, the first take they say is that they don't have personal information at all. And of course, they're forgetting their labor force. But from a relative perspective, it's not nearly as bigger, it's not nearly as an important task, compliance obligation, and I say that carefully, because it's not part of their key business process. It's part of their administrative business process. Another thing that's going to influence, are we ready for POPIA, the organization's ready for POPIA, is what we refer to as compliance maturity. And when we just deal in compliance with the market in a broader perspective, we find that organizations are at a different stage in a process towards maturity of a business function. Compliance has been around for a long time, but organizations have often just, kind of put it on the back burner and played the ignorance is bliss game. But more and more, as more regulations come into place, they have more and more importance, like POPIA is really important, and the regulators are getting more and more involved. And so organizations are getting, more apt to dealing with compliance issues. And POPIA is going to be one that's really going to kickstart it, will kick the process further along and get organizations more compliant. So we certainly hope that when organizations do look at POPIA, they don't look at it as an individual piece of legislation they have to comply to, but rather to look at the compliance as a whole and say, okay, let's, here's an opportunity for us to understand compliance and what we need to do, but let's not restrict our focus just to a single piece of legislation. Yeah, then the other thing I haven't quite mentioned yet is the size of an organization, and it kind of goes hand in hand with maturity. But John, Giles, and Michelson's have did a press release the other day regarding the obligations and sectional titles schemes. Now, in a townhouse complex, I lived in one with just 5 units. So just to get a trustee board together was quite a mission. And now if we look at the onus that this act is placing on them to have an information officer, and not only that, an information officer that could be personally liable, is, it's a huge thing. Now, an organization with a proper board of directors is going to understand that they got POPIA compliance issues or obligations coming soon. But what about smaller organizations? For instance, I'm part of the Gauteng Rowing Association, and in our records, we've got lots of information regarding schoolboys and girls on their rowing, their age, their sex, all sorts of stuff. Now, what do I need to comply with as an organization? But more importantly, whether I'm ready or not, am I physically capable, not me myself, but the organization, do we have the facilities or the capacity to fill those obligations? And then again, on the personal level, if we say, okay, well, what's the flip side? So POPIA is all about protecting my individual rights as an individual and my information. But, how am I going to get educated? Is it just reading the newspaper, or, it's going to be a period of time before the public understands what the privileges or their rights are going forward, and how is that going to manifest itself? And I just noticed when the IRMSA started recording the Zoom session, a little pop-up came and said, do you consent that this, is going to be recorded, or do you want to leave now? And I didn't, it occurred to me, well, geez, I've got an option here. I can opt out. Well, I don't really, but practically I had an option. So, and that leads to the GDRP, which has kind of been the forerunner, and maybe where we can look for examples and, how it might affect our industry. And one of the things that came up there is consumer activism. So we know that in South Africa, people like to get together and moan and complain and put legal processes into place, institute proceedings, etc. So how are the consumer bodies going to react to those who don't comply to POPIA regulations? Is there going to be a lot of consumer anarchy or militant consumers? So yeah, I hope I haven't dropped too many odd questions on John and Babita, but those are some of my personal thoughts, not necessarily Lexus Nexus, please. I've got to divide that line. But yeah, so without further ado, I just must remind you, polls, surveys, and Q&As, please, please, please use those. I've seen a lot of good mornings and a very cryptic one, M0S03UNY. I don't know what that message means, but please use the chat box, ask your questions, and we will get back to you. And then, yeah, to introduce Babita. Babita is well known in the industry. She's very visible out there. Babita has obtained her CPRAC from the Compliance Institute. I don't know if she's going to have to redo it now because the curriculum will change. She is an active member, not only of the Compliance Institute, but IRMSA, where we are here. And she has over 15 years experience in the energy, petroleum, and finance sectors, all around the compliance space. So I don't think you can get much more, a better qualified person than Babita to guide us through the next steps. And Babita, from Marsh, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Gregory. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to UMSA's POPIA session. So I think today you're going to hear a lot of similar words shared, and the whole purpose is that when you leave this session today, you must be able to leave the room understanding what POPIA is about, what does personal information mean, and how does it impact you as an organization. So today, what I'm going to be talking to you about is taking you through why is data privacy important. Let's look at POPIA. Where did it come from? How has it expanded through these years? Expand a bit on what special personal information is, looking at the cornerstone of POPIA, the 8 processing conditions, non-compliance. Obviously, there's always non-compliance and there's always penalties. And then let's have a view of how POPIA looks globally. Is there similarities? Are there differences? We're also going to look at how do you assess your privacy risk as risk professionals. And then we're going to snapshot the new kid on the block, the Cyber Crimes Act, and how it's related to POPIA. And what do you as a risk professional need to do or understand about the Cyber Crimes Act? So why is data privacy important? Now, if up till now you have not realized that personal information is a gold mine, is the gold of the cyber world, then I think you are lagging quite behind. Why is data privacy important? Before an organization even understands or realizes that they have an external party in the network, it's about 177 days that has passed. That means at this very moment, you have someone from an external environment that's in your network and going undetected. And once you've identified that, obviously it takes another 51 days before you can contain that data breach. The cost, financial risk, the cost of a cyber breach or data breach, that means personal information being leaked, is 40 million, an estimate, and it does not even include reputational damage. And we understand reputational risk is very, very critical in this day and age. We look at budgets where people when your finance manager sits with you and says, so what will be the cost of a data breach, or how will we budget for a cyber breach? It at least accounts for 50% of your budgets. But speaking of that, we understand that it's important that organizations or countries put together a privacy legislation. In South Africa, it's POPIA. We also understand that in South Africa, at least 46% of organizations are being attacked by a cyber attack. And if you're not aware, I think it's important you also speak to your IT or your cyber experts. On a second per second, there's always a hack happening. And this means that at any given point in South Africa, in the world, as we stand, organization systems are being hacked. So that's why data privacy becomes so important. So what is POPIA's journey? Where did it start? 2013, POPIA went through Parliament, it was signed, but it was not promulgated. Obviously, there were reasons for that. Taking into account, there was no regulator that was appointed, there were no regulations. So the government had to, first of all, appoint a regulator, which only happened in 2016. We then see that the regulations were published in 2018. We do know that the regulator had asked the president in 2020, January, please sign POPIA, promulgate the legislation. The president at that point did not sign it, but with COVID happening, what triggered the signing of POPIA was basically COVID. With COVID, everyone had to work virtually. That means it's easier for anyone to share information via shared networks. You are connecting via a Wi-Fi that might not be secure enough, etc. President signed POPIA 1st July 2020, promulgated. Effective 1 July 2021, I just want to say this, the effective date, the grace period is not determined by the regulator, it's part of the legislation. Everyone has been asking, can the regulator extend this date? No, it's not going to be extended. So that's a bit on the downside. If you were hoping that maybe it would be extended by 3 months, no, it's not going to be. So this has been POPIA's journey. From 2013, organizations should have started actually putting their controls in place. This is the legislation snapshot, what it looks like. It's not as daunting as other pieces of legislation. The heart and soul of this legislation resides on Chapter 3 to Chapter 9, where you're really looking at what are your risk areas, what are your controls, do you have sufficient and adequate controls, are they efficient, are they working, or are they not? Let's look at who are the important role players of POPIA. First up is the responsible party. So who's the responsible party? If you, as an organization, are collecting personal information, and by default, if you have employees, it means you are collecting personal information, you will be recognized as or defined as a responsible party. You collect and you process, you could store, delete, erase, archive, etc. So personal information is within your control. The data subject, let's understand in POPIA, a data subject is defined as a natural person and a juristic person, so organization information as well. We are not speaking about organization information that's available in the public domain. We're speaking about specific information that you only have of an organization that's not available on the public domain. Some organizations are really battling with that aspect of the juristic information, as most organizational information are available or is available on the public domain. Operator, if you collect the information but don't process it, you would have appointed an operator who processes this information for you, but is in no way under your control. So if you have such an agreement with an organization, you obviously need to also look at where your roles and responsibilities reside as well. Information officer, very important. The question is, have you appointed or registered your information officer with the regulator? Due date, 30th of June. I must say the website or the portal is down. I checked this morning as well, it was down. So if you have not yet registered your information officer, hopefully the regulator will extend that date because of the portal being down. Then the regulator, very important person, responsible for the regulations, guidelines, discussions, directives, issuing the directives to organizations, etc. So quickly, high level, what is personal information? What's special personal information? If we ever thought that personal information is name, surname, ID, and that's sufficient, you are wrong. Personal information is quite wide. We're not only speaking about a person's ID, we're speaking about race, gender, we're speaking about education. So if you have people's CVs, if you have a job advertised and you've received CVs of or resumes of individuals, what are you doing with that information? If they have not been successful, how are you communicating to them? Medical, understand medical information is personal sensitive information because it relates specifically to an individual. It's more than personal, it's sensitive. What do you do with sick notes? When an individual is ill, they submit a medical certificate to you. What do you do with it? Is it in hard copy? Who has access to it? Is it in soft copy? What do you do with the hard copies? So these are the questions that you need to start asking yourself when you're looking at personal information. physical addresses, contact numbers, app profile. These days, when you apply for a job, they say, please send in your LinkedIn, the link, or do you have a specific web address that we can access your information? That's all regarded as personal information. If you do provide that, understand you probably consented to it. However, we'll speak a bit about consent as well, why that becomes very important. If you are collecting information on personal opinions or views or preferences of an individual, understand that's personal information as well. Do you have the consent of the individual to collect information about them? If not, why are you doing that? You need to ask yourself that question. And this is what POPIA is bringing about to organizations. What are you doing with the information that you collect? How are you storing it? Do you communicate with your data subjects as well? Another aspect of personal information, biometric information, is also regarded as personal information. Where is the information stored? Who has access to it? Is it outsourced? Do you have an arrangement, an agreement with the organization that's doing their biometric capturing for you? So when we're looking at personal information, it's not just limited to an ID number. So we spoke about special personal information, religious information. If you're in the marketing industry, or if you have a marketing department and you want to communicate with your clients, you want to wish them well on certain religious holidays or birthdays, etc., do you have their consent? Have you informed them that the reason you are collecting this is that you would like to keep a good relationship with them? If you have not, you will need to start doing that. So that you can portray or display to the regulator that you have acquired consent from individuals. Criminal behavior, obviously when you are recruiting, you would do a background criminal check. Once you have completed the exercise, what do you do with the information? Understand it's considered as personal sensitive information. You do not go about collecting information regarding criminal activity of individuals unless if you have that specific portfolio or you are in national security and you need to collect certain information. Okay, so we're going to look at the processing conditions quickly. These are where organizations really need to ask themselves questions as to, first of all, why do I collect information? Am I guided by a piece of legislation? Am I guided by best practice? Is it industry requirements? Exactly why do I collect personal information? So when we look at accountability, we ask you the question, why do you collect the information? How do you process the information? Do you have the consent of the data subject? Does the data subject understand why you're collecting? Have you informed them at every aspect or every step of an application example that we do require this information because we need to do a credit verification, and once the results come out, we will then inform you, and based on that, we will either approve or we will not approve your application. So have you acquired consent? Understand consent means that the data subject has given you the right to collect, store, process, delete, erase, etc., the information. Are there specific reasons for collecting that information? If it is, it needs to be documented. Remember, when you're looking at controls and you're looking at your risks, you need to understand what are those specific controls. Why do you collect it? Is there a specific reason based on obviously your organization requirements? Further processing limitations. If you've collected the information for a specific reason, are you processing it or using it for other reasons as well? You need to understand this. You need to identify what are the risks associated with that. If you are, you need to understand that you need to inform the data subject that we have collected your information and we will be using your information for the following 5 reasons. Once the data subject is informed, they can then decide whether they give you the consent or they do not. How do you verify that the information you've collected is accurate and not misleading? So these days, if you go to a website and you want to download a book, and there's a whole host of information that you need to enter. Once you've entered it, you would be able to download the book. How do you as an organization verify that the information I have entered is actually correct? Do you contact the data subject? How do you do that? So if you do not, understand that the information you have will be inaccurate and it will be misleading. Being open to the data subject really means informing them, making them aware what you're doing with the information. How do you process the information? When you are deleting the information, informing them that you are going to delete the information. Security safeguards really looks at your entire IT or cyber security. What type of controls do you have? Have you encrypted your laptops? When you sent out confidential information, have you highlighted it as such? How do you ensure that there is proper security checks so that when anyone accesses your database, you would be able to pick that up almost immediately? Also, speaking of security safeguards, with COVID obviously being with us now for almost over a year, you as an organization need to have a COVID process so that your physical security jots down who has entered your premises, taken down temperature readings, etc. What are you doing with that information? Have you stored that information? Do you understand what the Department of Health requirements are? The regulator has issued a COVID process which indicates that the Department of Health keeps the information for a period of 6 weeks. Are you keeping that information since last year? Have you had a case of someone testing positive for COVID? Have you informed then your data subjects? And then COVID testing, temperature reading is health information, meaning it's personal sensitive information as well. Are you informing your data subjects what you're doing with the information? Then Condition 8 speaks about data subject specification. A data subject obviously has the right to amend the details, delete the information, or request you to make certain changes. All of these documents are issued by the regulator, needs to form part of your POPIA manual, your access to information manual, which also needs to be updated and is due on the 30th of June as well. So these are your 8 processing conditions which become very important for organizations to realize if we have met the requirements of the processing conditions. So what are your consequences? So anyone on this call, if you are an information officer, private organizations by default will be the CEO or MD. They can then appoint obviously a deputy information or 4 or 5 deputy information officers. Those deputy information officers can also appoint then a POPIA champion as well. So what is the consequences of non-compliance? On the organization, obviously financial penalties of up to 10 million. Not sure at this point how the 10 million will be made up. We are waiting with bated breath to see who's going to be made a case of come the 1st of July. Criminal sanctions of up to 10 years. We are seeing the information officer doing jail time. I'm sure that information officer is going to take his or her deputies with them to do some jail time as well. But bigger than that, and for any organization, it's not just the financial penalties or the criminal sanctions. It is losing customer trust. It's your reputational damage. How do you come back after you've lost, after your customers have lost trust in you? It takes you years to build trust. So understand that when you are dealing with your customers, you're dealing with their personal information. If you lose their trust, how do you win their trust back? For organizations, really looking at reputational damage is a bigger loss than a 10 million fine. But it does not stop there, because what is the impact on your employees? Specifically, of recent, we've seen that it's not only external people that enter your network and download a whole lot of personal information. It happens internally. So you have an employee who's a bit upset with you because, you know, you have not given them that bonus or that increase, or have promised for so many things and nothing's happened. But guess what? That individual also has access to personal information. What do? You should actually try and limit the excess. If an individual is under disciplinary hearing or has under dismissal, etc., you need to remove the excess rights. Understand that if an individual has access to your personal information residing in your network, they can easily download and publish it. We've seen it happen late last year. It was one of our big banks. The information was leaked out. It was a big hoo-ha. It was a cyber breach. Someone had entered the network, etc. Upon investigation, it was found out it was an internal data breach. Someone had leaked out the information. So don't only concentrate on only the impact on your organization. Understand who has access and what they're doing with those access rights. Okay, I've got a few more minutes left, trying to go through this as quick as possible. So how does POPIA look globally? So let's look. POPIA's principles and other areas which are important. If we look globally, we can see that most countries actually have similar requirements as POPIA does, and there are no differences. When it comes to privacy, there are more similarities than differences. I think key differences that we've noted with the GDPR specifically is that GDPR only applies to natural people, and GDPR is extraterritorial. So that means it will apply to you in South Africa, although you do not reside in the EU. There's also one big difference that GDPR has. It has the right to be forgotten. POPIA does not have that right. I don't think POPIA will include a right to be forgotten unless there are really good reasons to believe that certain data subjects should be forgotten. So how do you as risk management assess your POPIA risk? First of all, you need to understand or identify where are your risks. Who's collecting the information? Who's storing the information? Why are they collecting? And how are they storing? And who has access to it? So first of all, identify where your risks reside. Then assess your risks. How does a non-compliance how does a non-compliance impact you as an organization? Do a ISO 27002 cyber security gap assessment. Have you conducted one? If you have not, consider doing something to that extent. Then actually look at how you're going to mitigate this and how you're going to monitor it. So what is your roadmap or your plan in order to implement and mitigate the specific risk? And then how are you going to review and how are you going to report? Obviously, understand that with reporting, the information officer needs to report through to the regulator on an annual basis in terms of who has requested access to information. Has it been approved? Has it been declined? If it was declined, what were the reasons for declining, etc. If it was sent off to the ombudsman or to a regulator for review, what was the outcome thereof, etc. And obviously, how do you treat the specific risk. From a cyber perspective, obviously, you're looking at insurance. From a compliance perspective, understand that some cyber insurance also caters for the non-compliance fines, but it obviously needs to, you need to understand that if you do not have proper controls in place, your insurance might not pay out depending on whether there has been a cyber breach or not. So the new kid on the block, Cyber Crimes Act, this has come and has been promulgated. And we all expected it to happen. It has to go hand in hand with POPIA. If POPIA has been promulgated, cybercrime definitely had to be. So what does cybercrime mean to you as the chief risk officer or the risk officer within an organization? You are obviously owner of risk management, understand, but the chief information security officer is actually the owner of this risk. You as risk management need to have a strategic partnership with your CISO, specifically looking at your security risk management program. This is going to tie in very well with condition 7 of POPIA, where we speak of security safeguards. You need to create awareness. Obviously, the CISO needs to bring about that awareness, and so that everyone in the organization understand what the cyber portfolio cybercrime looks like, cybersecurity, what they can and cannot do. Okay, so as a matter of fact, when undertaking a POPIA risk assessment, consider doing your cyber risk assessment in line with your Cyber Crimes Act as well. So responsibility, yes, both are responsible for cybersecurity risk management. The CISO is responsible for the policy development and management. Monitoring happens obviously first line with the CISO, second line with the CRO or risk management. Security operations resides really with the CISO. Cyber intelligence, the reason why I have a question mark in there is that as risk management, obviously you'd understand, you need to know everything. You need to understand everything. Do you understand what cyber intelligence means and how does it impact you as an organization? Similarly, do you understand what privacy law means and how does it impact you as an organization and where your risks reside? Data loss and fraud prevention. How are you assisting the organization and assisting the CISO as well in terms of understanding fraud prevention or fraud as it stands, access management and governance? Obviously, do you have your governance models in place? Do you understand what cybercrime is, what privacy law breach means? How does data breach with privacy and cybercrime come hand in hand? Do you understand those models? Are they in place? Have they been implemented? Has there been awareness created? Obviously, on a POPIA side, we understand the information officer takes the lead on that. From a cybercrime perspective, we're looking at the CISO taking the lead in that, but you as risk management need to support and play the critical strategic partner with both the CISO and the information officer. And that brings me to an end of my presentation. So over to you, Gregory.
Thanks very much, Babita. That was awesome. I see you did have a slide there, questions, but we're going to keep those till the end. So please don't go away. I'll get Roxanne on your back if you do. I have seen one question come through the Q&A chat box. Please keep popping them in. We will answer them. We're not ignoring you if we don't answer in the chat box. We've got a Q&A session at the end where we will go through them. Again, thank you, Babita. I see that, you know, if I were participant in the sense that most of the participants are in this forum and not as a analyst or someone in the industry on the other side, I think there are two things I'll be taking away to take to my executive, especially, is one, no extension is going to be allowed. We've had 12 months and we need to have got our ducks in a row. And secondly, what goes with that is the consequence. And I'm glad you focus so much on the I don't know, gazetted consequence of fines and penalties, but on the reputational and the financial impact, because that's really what it's all about. We need to do this, we need to comply, not because we have to, but because, it's the right thing to do. And if it's the right thing to do, then, the consequence of not doing it is going to be damaging to your organization on a financial and reputational, which is also a financial side. The other thing I really enjoyed was how you brought the theory and the practice together. So, fortunately, you said it's quite easy to read the regulation and it's not as daunting as some of the others, but it's how do you apply it? Do you really understand what it means, in terms of taking the temperature down at the entrance of your office? Have we thought of those things? And no doubt, if we thought of 5, there are 30 that we haven't thought of. So, yeah, it's the theory and the practice. The theory is relatively easy. It's just getting down to do it and understand it. But how do we practice it? And then the other one that's got to me is the internal risk. Is how do you deal with people within your internal organization, be it carelessly or deliberately breaching the regulations. And then finally, I love the fact you threw in the cybersecurity, so that Julian and Roxanne and Val have got another topic up their sleeve for a couple of weeks' time, the Cybersecurity Act. So thanks you very much again, Babita. I really enjoyed that. Next up is John Giles. I beg your pardon?
No, I just said thank you, Gregory.
It's a pleasure. Don't run away, eh? Next up is John Giles from Michelson's. John has also had many practical years of experience in applying his knowledge. He's got a very broad experience in the industry. He's spent a lot of time helping large organizations comply with complex global data protection laws, like the GDPR, the PECR, and POPIA. And I know that he's also spent a lot of time with organizations in the information space and tech companies. So he is very well qualified also to join us and speak. And I look forward to hearing from you, John. Over to you.
Yes, Greg, thanks very much for that introduction. And it's great to be with you today. And I'm really looking forward to interacting with you and also answering as many of your questions as possible. I think if we could start with a few polls. Gregory mentioned at the beginning that we weren't sure as to where you were in your readiness journey. And it would be really interesting to get an idea of that. So maybe, Roxanne, if we can start with the first poll, number 1, just to get an idea of what size your organization is, which is an important factor in really determining what you're going to be doing for POPIA. Because if you're a small organization, you might be exempt from certain things, like having a PIA manual. And it also dictates to a large extent what you have to do. So if you wouldn't mind answering that, it'd be really interesting to see what sort of an audience we have today. And I think particularly for smaller organizations, most of what's written on the internet is for large organizations. And it really creates a lot of anxiety with small organizations because they can't do what large organizations have to do. So that's worth bearing in mind. Roxanne, I'm not sure how we're looking from a percentage voted perspective. Okay, great. So as I expected, 70% of us are large organizations, very few small organizations, which is great. That's good to know. And then Roxanne, if we can launch poll number 2 as well to get an idea of your state of readiness. And if you wouldn't mind ticking one of those boxes. So I think, as Greg mentioned, is that very few organizations can say we're ready and we fully comply. I don't think, or there'll be a handful literally in South Africa who will be able to say that by 1 July. Most organizations have done quite a lot of work, but they're not there yet. And this poll really would give us a good indication across this this group of attendees as to where you are in your process. Yeah, I mean, quickly, an interesting story here is that when Mark Zuckerberg appeared in front of Congress, a photographer took a photograph of him while he was sitting there, and in his notes, his handwritten notes, at the top of the page, written in big writing was, "Don't say that Facebook is compliant with the GDPR." And I think that that's, Facebook wasn't ready for GDPR. So there are lots of organizations that just won't be. So great, there are the results, and that's fantastic. There's 7% of you who say that you fully comply, which is great, but most of you have done a lot, but you're not there yet. And it's concerning that there are about 10% of you who haven't started yet. So hopefully I can help you a little bit in today's presentation. If we close that, Roxanne, then I think I'll talk you through really what we are wanting to cover today. So let me share my screen and show you the presentation that we use for virtually all of our engagements. And really, we use this analogy of growing a tree, determining what do you have to do for your specific organization in order to comply with data protection law. And there are 4 steps in the process. Sorry, I'm just moving things around a bit. So there are 4 steps in the process. The first step is to learn and raise your awareness, then plan what action you're going to take, then actually implement or protect personal data, and then sustain those efforts at the end. So one key point is that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is not a case that 1 July is the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the journey. So we've been working with hundreds of organizations to help them to get ready for 1 July. And in terms of planning, for us, these are the steps that you should take for planning. You should first brief your governing body, then get governance right, then choose some data protection or privacy management software that you're going to use in order to manage privacy in your organization. Then get a common interpretation about the law within your organization. Then map your activities so that you can create your record of processing activities, or ROPA. Do a gap analysis of sorts. There are many different types of gap analysis you can do, but often that's a great thing to do. Through your gap analysis, you identify what actions you're going to take, which obviously depends on the gap analysis, but it could be many. Then it's to work out what quick wins are there. What can we do that mitigates a high risk at a low cost? And maybe if I just quickly show you, no, it's actually not there. But really, let me go over here. In order to prioritize actions, it's often very useful to do a risk cost analysis. So those actions which are going to mitigate a significant risk at a low cost, those are your quick wins and things that you want to do. And then what we did in addition to that is that this last planet over here is that lots of clients have said to us, what must I do first? What do I need to have in place for the 1 July deadline? And it's a great question. And so what we did is we went and looked across the web. When we actually started doing this in the run-up to the GDPR deadline, which was in 2018, we continually monitor the web and search for lists that different people have provided. And there are various data protection authorities, for example, who have given lists of their top 12 things to do before a deadline, or this is the place to start. So we got all of those lists, and we then applied what we believed should be done first to that list. And then through consulting with many different organizations, we fine-tuned that list down to about 15 things. And that's essentially what I want to take you through now, is what are the 15 things we think you should do before 1 July? For those of you who haven't started, it's a great place to start. For those of you who have got far, it's a bit of a checklist and a bit of a revision to see what you've done. So this is the really about 15 things that we should believe you should do first. So let me share my screen again, and we come back here. So I'm going to flip across to over here, and here's the list of actions to take first. And And I'm going to go to over here. So number one, I'll zoom in a little bit there so it's a little bit bigger for you. So number one is learn from other jurisdictions. And I promise you this works so well. I was doing it this morning in preparation for an engagement that I'm doing tomorrow. Go and find the equivalent organization to yours in a jurisdiction like the UK. Go and look at their website. Go and look at their privacy policies. Look at their cookie notices. Look at what they say about data protection. You'll learn a huge amount because the whole of Europe and many other jurisdictions are way ahead of us. They had to do this 2 or 3 years ago. And we can learn a lot from what they're doing. Luckily, in a way, POPIA was delayed in terms of the commencement date. Because if it had, in 2013, that was pre-GDPR, if we had commenced our law, we would have been at the bleeding edge of data protection globally. But we're not anymore. We're way behind many other countries, so we can learn from them. Go and see what they've done. And I'm not suggesting that you copy their material, but have a good look and see what they've done. So the next action to take first is to brief your governing body. It's really important that the governing body, whether it's the board of directors or an exco or a steering com, they need to have a balanced view of data protection. And at the moment, there are many people who are panicking, and it's really about trying to calm down a governing body and say, look, everything's going to be okay. And I do think everything's going to be okay. Nobody's going to go to jail. I'm almost certain of that. There'll be a few people who will get fined, but it's going to be okay. We on a journey. It's going to take some time. And again, if we learn from the GDPR, it took a long time before data protection authorities started fining people. So brief your governing body. Then it's really important to raise awareness amongst your managers or decision makers. And so that's normally a small group of people. Sometimes people call them champions. You have data protection champions in different areas, in HR and finance. Start by making sure that they are aware of what data protection is all about. Don't do awareness training throughout your organization at this point. That comes later. And many people, they want to do that now, but it's too early to do it. You really should do that later. All right, then as part of getting governance right, you want to appoint a data protection officer or an information officer. So a really important point here is that in South Africa, it works differently to the EU. In the EU, only some organizations need to have a data protection officer. In South Africa, every single body has one by default. So whether you like it or not, you have one. And Babita mentioned it's essentially the head of a private body. They are by default the information officer. So you then want to think, okay, should that information officer, should we designate somebody to be the information officer? And that's a really important decision to make. I think if I flip across here again, let me quickly show you this. In terms of getting governance right, we've developed this governance model. And this really shows you where you've got the CEO as the default information officer. They designate somebody to be an information officer. That can be called the deputy information officer. We prefer them being called the designated information officer. And then you've got this model with you've got champions in different areas, and they all report into the information officer who has support both internally and externally. But my hot tip here is keep it simple. The regulator's portal is poor in that there are many technical faults. There are also many limitations to it. So at the beginning, don't get too complicated. Don't have a structure with your default CEO appointing 3 or 4 deputies, each with deputies underneath it, because you're not going to be able to register all of them, and it's just too complicated. Because the other problem that the regulator's portal has is that you can only register a person once as an information officer. And for many people, they're going to be an information officer for many different entities. But it's very important to get this right because you really want the authorities to find you. It sounds crazy, but What you don't want is to be in the dark. In other words, the regulator is investigating you, or authorities in Europe are investigating you, and you don't know. So you want them to be able to find you, find the right person and contact them. And that's really the purpose of registering your information officer with the regulator and other authorities. So that's an important thing to do. I'm not going to talk about creating an EU one-stop shop. It's a great thing to do if you have to comply with the GDPR and you're in multiple EU countries. It would be very worthwhile doing that, but I think let's leave that there. So the next thing you've got to do, and it's actually almost too late already, is determine whether you need to get prior authorization from the information regulator, and if you do, apply for it. The reason why it's too late is that the regulator's got 4 weeks to assess your application. And so we've got now, it's almost 3 or something weeks to the deadline. If you submit your application now and the regulator doesn't get back to you and we go past 1 July, then you have to stop processing, which is going to have a absolutely catastrophic impact on your operations. But to reassure you, only a few people need to get prior authorization. Not everybody does. It's really if you're profiling people, processing criminal behavior on behalf of other people. If you're a credit bureau and you're in the business of issuing credit reports, and if you transfer special personal data or children's information to countries that don't have adequate protection in place, that's when you need prior authorization. But you need to do an assessment, work out whether you need it, and if you do, apply for it as soon as you possibly can. All right, the next one is plan your incident response or breach management. So again, this is about 1 July is the beginning. What you want to do well from 1 July is manage incidents and breaches in an effective way. You want to be notifying the regulator and data subjects. You want to be learning from them, creating a feedback loop so that you can start plugging the holes which caused the previous incident. It's also going to be the classic scenario where you have a breach, and we've already seen this with the information regulator. You have a breach and you notify them about it. Obviously, that's waving a huge big flag at the regulator saying, well, come and investigate me. And they are then going to start asking questions. But it's even worse if you don't notify them. So it's a very important thing to get right. And the way you get it right is that you need to have policies and procedures in place. You need to do dry runs. It's a little bit like fire drills, because when you have a breach, things happen fast. You need to notify the regulator within 72 hours, for example. There are lots of decisions that need to be made, lots of people who have to perform different roles. We are a breach coach to many different organizations and coach them through breaches, and it's intense. And you need to prepare, you need to practice, you need to be ready for the breach. And I think, as Babita mentioned, it's really a matter of time before you have a breach, not if you're going to have a breach. Then the next one, action to take first in our view, is to get cyber insurance, especially if you are worried that you have gaps. It really is a good idea, and I've spoken a lot about this. Yeah, it really makes sense to look into this. I think I'll leave it at that. All right, the next action to take first is to identify the software tools that you will need to use. And in our view, there are 3 things you need to get data protection right. You need know-how, you need guidance, you need knowledge, you need templates, you need checklists, and that's really the Michelson's program. Then you need software in the form of privacy management software. And there are multiple vendors who provide that, but it's becoming almost impossible to manage privacy properly unless you're using software. The classic examples are people try to map their activities, or to create a data inventory, or to map their data flows. They're different terminology, but essentially it's the same thing. And people try and do that using spreadsheets, and they get themselves into a hell of a mess. Or you try and do risk assessments across, or a data protection impact assessment or a privacy impact assessment. You try and do that across multiple different divisions in a large organization with many different recipients. You'll get yourself into a mess very, very quickly. And so they're great tools that can help you achieve that. And for all of you who are large organizations, particularly those who have a high impact, you almost certainly need to be using data protection software. All right, next one is have a complaints procedure in place. You want customers to complain to you and data subjects. So whether they're employees, whether they're members, whether they're customers, you want to know when people are unhappy about what you've done with their personal data, because you don't want them going to the regulator. You want them to come to you so that you can fix it. And so encourage people to complain to you and make sure that you deal with it effectively when they do. Next one is update your customer-facing documentation. Sorry. So it might have a bit of a mess internally, but you want to create the impression externally to your customers that everything is good and in order. You want the outside world to think that you comply. It's a trust building exercise. And if your data subjects don't trust you with their personal data, you're going to have a serious problem. So you want to look at your website, look at what policies are there, put your hat on of being a customer and look at what they are seeing. What are you projecting? How does your organization show up from a privacy perspective? Next one is manage your relationship with customers who are controllers. So the rest of the world talks about a controller. In South Africa, it's a responsible party. The rest of the world talks about a processor. In South Africa, it's an operator. So if you are generally an operator, you process for responsible parties. You want to manage that relationship with them, and really you're going to need a data processing agreement or a DPA. We literally have done hundreds of them in the last few months, and they're going to be hundreds more done in the next few months. Then manage your relationship with your service providers as processors. So where you now the responsible party, you've got lots of operators who process for you, you're obliged by law to enter into a contract with those processors. Before 1 July, you've got limited time. So identify the processors or operators who process the most sensitive personal data for you and go and sign a contract with them. Maybe just pick 3 and get that done before 1st of July. Then next is to minimize access to sensitive data. That's really a technology or an IT issue around access control. Then we argue that you should decide to follow privacy by design strategy and really try and ensure that everything your organization does into the future thinks about privacy and embedding it by design and by default into what you're going to be doing. Then you want to enable data subject participation. So data subjects can ask for access to their personal data. They can correct it. They can opt out. They can. One of the central themes of data protection is data subjects should have control or ownership over their personal data. So it's really about servicing your customers or your data subjects. And so work out how are you going to enable their participation? How they call DSARs or data subject access requests. How are you going to manage DSARs? And again, there's some fantastic technology tools that'll help you do that really well. The last is about data portability, which I'm not going to mention there. Here is our list of useful resources. These are the lists that we found on the web that we think are pretty good. Particularly the ICO has this list of 12 steps to take now, which is definitely worth looking at. So I think that is really me from a time perspective. So what I'd like to do now is Roxanne, if we could run the last poll, number 3, and I'd just like to get some feedback from you as to whether you think that's a good list or not. And we've just got a yes or no answer. If you answer no, please won't you just pop in the chat and say what you think's missing from the list and what you would add to that list of actions to take first before the 1 July deadline. So while you're doing that, I see that there are quite a few questions and comments have come through the box. But I think that's what we're going to move on to now, is to Q&A. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing your questions. Really interested to see what you think are actions that need to be added to that list. So maybe, Roxanne, if we can just see. Okay, well, that's great. So we've got 98% of you. That's an A, I think. No, that's great. But I'm really interested in what's missing from the list. So please do let us know. But Greg, back to you.
Thanks very much, John. And yeah, what a simple way to take away our fears about, really putting it into almost a checkbox. This is what you need to do, and I really appreciate that. You mentioned that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and that July is the start date and not the end date. And that reminds us that it's not a point in time kind of exercise. It's something that we've got to now embed into our business processes. But you said it's okay. No one will go to jail. And I just want to remind you, this is a recorded session, and we've got your number. And if that proves not to be correct, we'll hold you to it. But yeah, keep it simple. And that's exactly what you've done. And I think we can take away a lot of information from your session. It's just to make it really, really practical. Breach management, again, you emphasize it like Babita did. It's going to happen. Don't be surprised when it happens. Be prepared. So yeah, insurance, necessary expense. And like the mafia says, wouldn't it be terrible if something happens to your brother? So yeah, insurance is really important. And then the data subject participation. And I think that's one where there's going to be a lot of, how do we get around that? And then, being a bit one-sided or on the side of an organization, let's hope that the consumers are not so aware of their privileges, so that we can get this kind of thing, bedded down, to deal with what, how they can adjust their own data is not an easy thing, even with information. So thank you very, very much for that, John. So we're going to move on to the question and answer now. And being a compliance individual, I'm going to start with the people that use the Q&A box and were compliant, and not the ones that use the chat box. Babita, you spoke about the employment contract or the employment environment. We've got a question here. What is the impact on POPIA with regard to the employment contract? Are there things that are no longer involved here? Kobus, I see you also like to answer that question. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Got to get used to my technology here.
Okay. So in terms of the employment contracts, obviously, what we have seen is, and what we've assisted clients with, is they need to update the employment contracts, because you are collecting personal information. You do require the consent of your employees as well, because also remember, although you have induction and you inform your employees, this is what we're doing, these are the departments we have, etc. You also need to inform them. If you have a third party who's doing your pension fund example, you will be passing that information over to them. Are your employees aware of that? In days gone by, I think people were not even, maybe not as interested or educated about it, but going into the future, as we see it, as data subjects become more aware, you would need to update your employment contracts. As John has said, 1st July is the day it begins. So that means come 1st July, are your contracts updated? Are they not? You need to update them. All employees who are being appointed need to have the new contracts. If you have an annual process where you need to verify information, it's good to include your consent as part of that verification process as well. Yeah.
Thanks. John, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, just to add to what Babita's saying is that a hot tip, particularly given that we've got the 1 July deadline, definitely going forward is to have your employment contract and to sign that going forward But for past employees, what you can do is create a human resources or employee privacy policy, which explains how you process employee data. And then your privacy policy is probably, your employment contract is probably going to say, I, the employee, agree to abide by company policies from time to time. So that means you can then introduce a new policy without having to update your employment contract, which can be a really significant exercise if you've got lots of employees.
Okay, thanks, Babita and John. We've also, in the presentations, we spoke about the information officer. So the question is, should the information officer come from the legal unit, the risk management, or the ICT unit? John, would you like to answer that for us?
Yes, sure. So remember that you have one by default and they can't get out of the accountability. That's the head. They can then delegate the responsibility to somebody, and we like calling that the designated information officer. We do not think they should be from the ICT unit. That is a mistake. Often they are somebody from legal, compliance, risk management, GRC, information management. There it depends on the organization to a large degree. But I mean, there's a lot to this question and a lot to think about. But in our view, it really needs to be somebody who's senior, somebody who knows the activities of an organization well and has good leadership skills.
Excellent, thank you, John. From Shora, please advise which form in the regulation must be used by the data subject to complain about data breach on their personal information.
Okay, so they okay.
Go ahead, Babita. Sorry. I need to advise you guys better on who should be. We spread the questions around.
That's fine. So, John, I suppose you can also answer, but if I understand, so you do have a you need to include it as part of your privacy policy. You can have a standalone data breach process as well as form. Remember, your information officer needs to keep track as well of any data breaches as well. So there could be a template. John, I'm not sure if there is one issued by the regulator as such. I know there's other forms, standalone forms that have been issued, but specifically on the data breach.
So there is one in the regulations, but my understanding is that the regulator is currently working on a portal, a system that will be a complaints management system, because as you can imagine, I mean, there should be hundreds of complaints every day in South Africa around data protection, and the regulator's never going to manage that unless they can use technology to do it. And so that's our understanding, is that that's what the regulator is busy doing. Yeah. And I just keep on picturing a dashboard that the regulator is going to look at with all these complaints coming up, and whoever is the highest is who they're going to phone. So hence why you want your own complaints procedure and try and stop your data subjects from complaining to the regulator so that you don't end up on that dashboard.
Yeah, very good point there. Let's deal with it before it becomes an issue. But this one's addressed to you, Babita, so it takes away my anxiety. Good morning all. Babita, would tracking of people's locations via apps, etc., be considered sensitive information? To what extent can it be acceptable for an organization to make it mandatory for the data subject to share their location and other data in order to make use of their products and services? I guess that's got a lot to do with consent.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, informing your data subject, why do you require location information? That's the first thing. And then secondly, if they consent to it, that means they give you permission and say, yes, you can, then you can do that. I mean, if you think of it, if you use Google Maps and you put down your location and wherever you go, whichever area you visit, you have, I've seen it happen to me. I have a question pop up. How did you like Stanton City today? And I would say, oh my word, someone's tracking where I am. And without knowing, you have actually consented to Google Maps tracking where you go and what you do. So a lot to do with consent as well as informing them. I would want to know why you want to know where my location is and what you're going to do with that information. So again, education and awareness to your data subjects, not only internally, but also to your data subjects externally as well.
Okay, thank you. From Larato, vaccination is not compulsory, but the narrative in most organizations have essentially made vaccination a given in how they speak in a blanket statements. What does this fit in with the fact that vaccination is sensitive information? John, do you want to try and take that? Or you happy?
Yes, I'm happy to take it. Yeah, so coronavirus and COVID has raised all sorts of privacy and data protection related issues from the beginning of the pandemic. And we've written extensively about it on our website because we've felt it as a public service to try and help people to get guidance. Many authorities around the world gave great guidance on what to do. South Africa was a bit slow. The regulator did publish a guidance note on it, which was really developed by a group that did it collectively to give to the regulator. We're actually currently researching various key questions around things like vaccine passports, when employers can disclose who's been vaccinated or not. It's almost now we're getting the questions are how do we exit from the pandemic and how do we deal particularly with vaccines? So I'm afraid I don't have specific answers to that, but it is a question that everyone's grappling with, and we are researching it at the moment and trying to find answers for it.
Thanks, John. Babita, you told us earlier that the registration portal was down. Perhaps you can answer this. I have a question from anonymous. I have a question with regards to the registration of both the information officer and deputy information officers. Who's supposed to run that function? I guess they from an internal perspective.
No, I think that question was answered as well. By default, the information officer will be the senior, the CEO or MD. Internally, we also spoke about who it can be. It could be a financial director as a deputy, etc. With the portal being down, the challenge that you have is, and we've seen it, where we tried to register a few of our clients with the by sending a hard copy, and the regulator came back and said, please wait for the portal to be up and running and submit an electronic application. So the portal is down. Up until it opens up, you unfortunately will not be able to register unless the regulator indicates that please submit all your information officer registration forms to the following email. So Gregory, if I understand, there were two questions in that. One was the registration with the portal being down, and the other one is who should take that responsibility. So organizations, it depends, right? We've also seen with big organizations where we have a holding company and subsidiaries. We've seen that the holding company will register the IO, the subsidiaries, MDs or CEOs become the deputy. The POPIA champions become the FDs or the financial managers, and they appoint other employees within that structure. So really your information officer structure will depend on your organization structure and the requirements that you have as well. And also, how much of information do you have? And who's monitoring it? I think the big challenge is going to come, who's going to monitor that, those processes.
Okay, and here's another one that's related to roles of the risk and information officer. In my organization, we have a risk and compliance officer and also a legal manager, and it now becomes difficult to share the duties of POPIA. It's not a question, but maybe something you can just talk to.
Yeah, I think it's really important that, as with anything, that one person is responsible. There are lots of people who have an important role to play, like risk has an important role to play, but you need to have one information officer who sits across different areas and coordinates everything. And that's why that governance model that I showed you, the information officers across all different areas. And so I encourage most large organizations, the default can't do everything because they're a senior person who've got lots of accountability and responsibilities. So they need to delegate to one person. But I would say keep it simple, identify one person, make them it, and then they need to bring in lots of other people to help get done what needs to happen.
Thank you. I've just lost my next question. So obviously a lot of personal information is stored on computer hardware, such as laptops. So we have a question. Good day. Is it true that there are software that can be used to retrieve information from hard drives? If so, what is the best way of disposing of laptops and computers with personal information?
So I'm not an IT specialist, but what I do know is that you first of all, if you are replacing a laptop, you need to clean it out, and the IT technicians normally do that, where they would clean out the hard drive. There are certain components that they need to destroy completely before they decide that this laptop can be basically disregarded or used as junk or obsolete assets. And so that's my understanding. That's what happens. I'm not sure, Giles, John, sorry, from your side, if there is any specific IT requirements that you know. I know there is a process that's followed, but from your side.
Yeah, John, I'm sure there's some practical elements to this as well as the legislation.
Yes, so when it comes to hard drives, I think the important things are to encrypt all your laptops. And Microsoft comes with BitLocker, Mac comes with File Vault, and it's no extra cost. And so you want to encrypt all your drives while people are using them. When you then are going to dispose of it, you must scrub those hard drives. So I agree with Babita. I've also seen some demos from companies that actually shred hard drives. So you put it into a machine and it chops it into little pieces. That's if you want to be absolutely safe, because it is very hard to scrub a hard drive to the point where you cannot retrieve any data from it. But yeah, those are some thoughts.
Thank you. We got someone obviously from the government or a government entity. There are no guidelines to deal with cyber insurance in government. Government does not generally believe in insurance. How do you suggest they go about this? I mean, you suggested that insurance was a really key part of managing your data protection risks. Can you get around without insurance?
So, Gregory, maybe if I can answer that specific question. When you're looking at insurance as part of your risk management process, obviously you're looking at treating your risk. If you've identified your risk and you decide that you're going to take out insurance, obviously you need to know the amount. And if your organization is not willing to take out the insurance to mitigate or treat that specific risk, you need to understand if you do have specifically the controls are sufficient to mitigate that risk. Do you have sufficient budget to cater for a data breach? Remember, I showed figures. We're looking at 40 million. Do you have that type of amount to cater for a possible data breach? So those are the type of questions that you need to pose to management, and then do it from a holistic perspective. Look at what's happened in South Africa recently. I think Virgin Active a few weeks ago, we had a data breach as well. What are the costs? Look at the Experian case. The regulator is still not convinced that everything is kosher with Experian at this point. And so when it comes to insurance, I think you need to put a business case together for management to understand that if they do not have the appetite for that specific risk, it would be best to do insurance. So it's a whole risk management process then.
So I guess then the answer is that, you know, the organization's got to clearly understand whether they're prepared to take on that risk or effectively self-insure. Thank you. Another question from Anonymous, maybe a different Anonymous. Can student applicants be regarded as data subjects? And yeah, Babita, do you want to, you're on screen?
Definitely, they are considered. They are not minors. They're above 18. And also interesting, the tertiary education level in the country, they have their code of conduct that was issued. Most of the universities have adapted to that specific code of conduct, guiding them really how to handle student information, what controls they need to put in place, etc. So yes, you are regarded as a data subject. Even if you're a minor, you would be regarded as a data subject.
Thank you. John, I'm going to ask you this one. In the case of sectional title schemes, most trustees are not well versed with POPIA compliance requirements. What are the circumstances in which a managing agent can be appointed as an information officer on behalf of the body corporate with which they manage? And then will a trustee who is appointed as an information officer incur liability in his or her personal capacity or non-compliance?
Yeah, so it's good questions. And the regulator's given us a guidance note on information officers. And they've said to us that the information officer can't be outsourced. It has to be an employee of the company. And so you can't appoint the managing agent as your information officer. You can't appoint anyone. It's got to be somebody in the organization. So this raises a lot of questions for organizations like pension funds, community schemes. There are lots of organizations where the person says, well, but look, I don't know anything about this. How can I be the information officer? The trick there is that by default, it's the head of that body. So for a body corporate, it's going to be one of the trustees, possibly the chairperson. And they are the default. They can't escape that, and they need to register themselves with the regulator. What they can do is contract with a third party like a managing agent to perform some of the responsibilities. But that managing agent is not the information officer. They don't need to register. It's still the default is the information officer, but they can delegate some of the responsibility. So the default can delegate responsibility, but not accountability. So it is going to be the head of the body. If someone has to go to jail, which is very unlikely, it would be the head and not the person who's responsible for it. But this is an issue that lots of people are struggling with. And in my view, the regulator in South Africa needs to grant an exemption that's similar to the GDPR in Europe, where not everybody has to register their information officer. It doesn't make sense for a small organization with a low impact, like a coffee shop. A coffee shop at the moment has a default information officer who has to be registered with the regulator. It's just crazy. It's nuts. That's why their portal falls over, because the whole country is trying to register their information officer. We should definitely do what Europe's done. And it's only those organizations that process a lot of personal data, and particularly those that pose a high risk to data subjects, that should have one and have to register the person.
Thanks, John. We have a question from Betty. What about service providers from a supply chain perspective? Can one send a standard request to consent going forward? What about current proposal received for tender processes or documents currently processed? Is consent required? Like we're talking, I guess, about going back into existing documentation, and I guess it's related also to rewriting your employment contract. John, I see you've got your hands up.
Shall I go first, and then Babita, I'll hand over to you. I think a few key things here is that your suppliers are data subjects, and including juristic persons. So you've got to be careful how you process the personal data of your suppliers And so it might make sense for you to have a supplier privacy policy. And there's quite a lot then to protecting their information, because suppliers often give you copies of directors' IDs and financial statements and all sorts of information as part of the tender process. So that's really an important thing to focus on. But then the other component that's related but different is that your suppliers might be an operator for you. They might be processing personal data on your behalf. And you need a contract in the form of a data processing agreement to manage that component of your relationship with them. But Babita, over to you.
No, you're correct, John. And also what we've seen happening is where organizations are really sending out POPIA agreements to their suppliers, customers, operators to say, these are the requirements. You are not allowed to send information, example, across the borders unless you have our permission. You are not allowed to do the following. You need to provide consent for ABCD, etc. So that is also currently happening. And it's also quite surprising that at this point, there aren't many organizations that's doing that as well and saying, please give me the comfort that you are keeping my information, securely, and you have conducted a personal impact assessment as well. So it's not happening as much as what we would have thought or hoped it would. But I think from after the 1st of July, we can see that these kind of agreements, contracts, etc., confirmations being sent out to suppliers and customers.
Thanks. And we've got another question regarding consent from Josephine. It's very practical. What is the most effective way of obtaining consent from existing customers for marketing purposes? And I would imagine that's more in the B2C kind of environment.
I can start there. Yeah, so for marketing purposes, particularly direct marketing, what the important thing to remember is that you only need consent if you're going to electronically market to prospects, people you don't know. So if you're going to email people you don't know, you need opt-in consent. But you can email an SMS market to customers on an opt-out basis. You can also market by physical means on an opt-out basis to prospects and customers. So you can send traditional snail mail to anyone on an opt-out basis. You can also make outbound phone calls on an opt-out basis. So you only need to get opt-in consent if you direct electronically marketing to people you don't know. And in that scenario, it's pretty tricky because you've got one opportunity to get that consent. You can send one email, one SMS, and that's it. You can then phone them and ask for consent to send them emails. But you've got one opportunity through an electronic channel.
Thanks. From a consumer perspective, can I be deprived of a service if I do not want to share my personal information? I guess this can only be an example where that personal information is not included as part of the service, not required for that service.
Exactly. I think that's the only time you can, if the personal, and this is why we say that POPIA is brought about that organizations understand why they need the information and also understand what they're doing with the information. If you do not need personal information, then you do not need to acquire it from your customers or clients. However, if it's part of your process, you need to then create that awareness or being open to your client and customer and say, we require this information for the following reasons, so that they make an informed decision when they say, I hereby provide you with my consent as well.
Thanks.
Maybe just to add to that, I mean, what's happening at the moment in the world is there's often an exchange, which is a company says, I'll provide you with something really cool like Gmail, and in exchange, you consent to me processing your personal information. And in that sort of a scenario, if you can't have Gmail but not give them your personal data, it just doesn't work. So I would say yes, you can definitely be deprived of a service if you're not prepared to share your personal data.
Thanks. We're running out of time, so I'm only going to take one more question. Comes from Annalie, just referring to the retention of records or keeping records for only as long as necessary. It's a big project given the fact that retention period for all records needs to be defined. Is a strategy, given the timelines, to archive records with limited access okay, and then to destroy as and when retention periods have been defined?
I would say yes, that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, you know, you've got to retain records for certain periods under law. And so stick with those retention periods, secure the records while you have them. When the retention period is up, that's when, and they'll be staggered in the future at different points in time. So it'll make the task more manageable. But when the retention period's up, that's your opportunity to say, okay, the law no longer requires me to have this. Should I destroy it? What personal information is in it? Is the purpose that relates to that personal information complete? If yes, then you destroy the personal data that's in the record.
Yeah.
Babita, you seem to agree there.
Yes, no, definitely. You need to identify the types of records, the requirements of legislation. If there's no guidance from legislation, you need to see what's best practice, what's common law, how long do you keep the records for? And that's the reason why POPIA is bringing this back to organizations and say, understand what you have, what you're doing with it, how long you're keeping it. I have had cases where clients are keeping information for 40 years and they still have the information. So, you know, so it's time to sort of clean out what do you have and what you're doing and how long you're keeping it for. So definitely agreed with what John has said.
Okay, everybody. I'm afraid we're out of time. We've got several questions that are not yet answered. I'm going to ask John and Babita to try and answer them with their fingers on their keyboards. There were a lot of questions that were asked in the chat box. If you could please cut and paste them into the Q&A box. We didn't get to a lot of them. There are some duplicates, so I'm sure you know some answers will refer to previous answers. So just a big thank you to John and Babita. You guys have a wealth of experience that's very, very abundantly clear. And the value that you have offered to us as attendees is enormous, and we thank you for that. And then obviously to IRMSA for hosting this session. I think with 160 odd participants on the line, it's clear that there's a huge desire to understand what's going on. And you know, not only this session, but the sessions that IRMSA have regularly run are hugely popular, and it just speaks to the fact that you guys are able to identify the burning issues and get them addressed by really people that understand what's going on. So a big thank you to IRMSA. And with that, if there's nothing, Julian, if you're still on the line, do you want to say a closing word, or can we just end the webinar from here? I'm not sure if Julian's still online. No. So then a big thank you. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the session. Please use the Q&A. I know that we will be sharing the recorded session. There were a couple of questions asked about the slides in particular. I think John's was more of an application than a slide, so I'm not sure he will be able to share that. But yeah, what we can share, we will share. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, bye. Beep.